I remember the moment as if it were yesterday. We were sitting at the dinner table, the air heavy with the silence that had been growing between us for weeks. Emily, my wife of 12 years, looked at me with an expression that was almost unreadable, cold, detached, yet strangely resolute. I had just finished talking about the new project at work, expecting her usual nod or half-hearted smile. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and let out a deep sigh. "You have become so weak in bed," she said, her voice as casual as if she were commenting on the weather. "I'm going to sleep with other men." My fork clattered onto the plate, the sound echoing in the quiet room. I stared at her, trying to process what I had just heard. My heart felt like it had stopped, frozen in disbelief. I had expected anything but this, a complaint about the chores, maybe a gripe about my long hours at work, but not this. My stomach churned, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. "Excuse me?" I managed to say, my voice strained. "You heard me," she replied, her eyes cold and unblinking. "I'm not going to pretend anymore. You've lost your edge and I need more. I deserve more. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I had loved and trusted was sitting across from me, casually admitting that she planned to cheat on me if she hadn't already. Anger, shame, and despair swirled inside me, a toxic cocktail that left me reeling. I wanted to yell, to smash something, to demand how she could be so heartless. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, trying to understand where things had gone so horribly wrong. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and insecurity. I replayed her words over and over, each time hoping I had misunderstood, that it was all some cruel joke. But deep down, I knew the truth. Emily had checked out of our marriage, and I had no idea how to get her back, or if I even wanted to. A part of me wondered if she had already found someone. Was she meeting him while I was working late, or sneaking out on the weekends when she claimed to be with her friends? The thought of her with another man, sharing the intimacy that was supposed to be ours, made me feel hollow inside. I felt like a fool, a pathetic, gullible fool who had been blind to the signs all along. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to understand what was really going on, to gather my thoughts before I made any decisions. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I had been too distracted to see before: her frequent text messages, the late nights out, the sudden interest in her appearance. Every detail felt like a knife twisting in my gut, confirming what I had feared. But then something unexpected happened. Something that turned my world upside down in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was a Sunday morning, and I had woken up early, determined to confront Emily, to demand answers, or maybe just to see if she would lie to my face again. But when I went downstairs, I found the house empty. The silence was deafening, the kind that makes your skin crawl. I noticed that her car was gone, and I figured she had gone out, probably with him. I made myself a cup of coffee, the bitterness matching my mood, and returned upstairs to our bedroom. I opened the door and froze. There, lying in our bed, was a woman, a stranger, yet not. She was beautiful, her dark hair splayed across my pillow, her body draped in the sheets that still smelled faintly of Emily's perfume. But it wasn't T. Emily. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open as she realized I was standing there staring at her. Her expression shifted from sleepy confusion to panic as she sat up, clutching the sheets to her chest. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of shock and anger. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. I'm sorry. I thought this was okay." Emily said what? I cut her off, my mind racing. "She said it would be fine, that you wouldn't mind." Her voice trailed off as she saw the look on my face. It hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about Emily cheating on me. This was about her pushing me away, humiliating me in the most twisted way possible. She had invited another woman into our bed as if to prove some point, to show how little she thought of me. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. When Emily walked through the door that morning, still glowing from whatever night she had spent, she found me sitting in the living room, my face a mask of cold fury. I didn't say a word as she entered the house, her smile fading when she saw the look on my face. "What is wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with fake concern. "I want you to see something," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. She followed me upstairs, her footsteps hesitant, as if she sensed that something was horribly wrong. When we reached the bedroom, I pushed the door open, revealing the woman still sitting on the bed, looking more terrified by the second. Emily S.'s face went pale, her eyes wide with shock as she took in the scene. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes, as if she finally realized the gravity of what she had done. "You have been having your fun," I said, my voice cold as ice. "Now it's my turn." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The color drained from her face, and she looked at me as if she didn't recognize the man standing before her. And in that moment, I knew I had taken the first step down a path that would change everything, one that would lead to consequences neither of us could have ever imagined. Emily stood there, paralyzed by the scene in front of her. The woman in our bed, her bed looked just as horrified, clutching the sheets like they were her last defense. My heart was pounding, each beat echoing with the rage and betrayal I felt. Emily S.'s eyes darted between me and the woman, her expression shifting from shock to something I couldn't quite read. Was it regret, shame, or something else? I didn't care. "Who is she?" Emily finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does it matter?" I shot back, my voice cold and detached. "You made it clear that our marriage is nothing more than a farce, so I thought I'd return the favor." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. I could see the realization dawning on her, the understanding that I wasn't playing by the rules she had set. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had been the one in control, the one with the power to hurt, and now that power was slipping away. "I never meant for this to happen," Emily stammered, her voice trembling. "This isn't... I didn't what?" I snapped, taking a step closer to her. "Didn't think I'd find out? Didn't think I'd retaliate? Or maybe you just didn't think at all?" She flinched, as if I had struck her. And for a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had been my partner, my confidant, my everything. But that image shattered as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the cold reality of who she had become. The woman on the bed, sensing that she was at the center of something much darker than she had bargained for, started to gather her clothes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with regret. I didn't think. "Just go," I said, not even looking at her. She quickly dressed and slipped out of the room, leaving Emily and me alone, facing each other in the wreckage of what had once been our life together. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The silence was deafening, filled with all the things neither of us could bring ourselves to say. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to find a way to salvage whatever was left, but there was nothing she could say that would make any of this okay. "You invited someone into our bed, Emily," I finally said, my voice breaking the silence. "You threw away our marriage for a thrill, and now you expect me to what? Forgive you? Pretend like nothing happened?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she took a step toward me. "I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was angry, hurt. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. But this," she gestured helplessly toward the bed, "this wasn't supposed to happen." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that filled the room. "Oh, so this wasn't a part of your plan? You didn't expect me to fight back? To take control for once? I never wanted this," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I was stupid and selfish, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please don't do this. We can fix this." "Fix this?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Emily, you broke us the moment you decided you were done with me. There's nothing left to fix." She fell to her knees, sobbing, and reached out for me, but I stepped back. I couldn't let her touch me, not now, not after everything. "Please," she cried. "Please, I am begging you, Dawn, to leave me. Dawn, to throw everything away." I felt a pang of something pity, maybe, but it was quickly smothered by the anger and betrayal burning inside me. I had spent so many years loving this woman, giving her everything I had, only for her to rip it all apart without a second thought. "I am not throwing anything away," I said, my voice cold and final. You already did that. Now you have to live with the consequences. Her sobs grew louder, and for a moment, I almost faltered. But then I remembered the months of lies, the cold nights when she was distant, the gut-wrenching realization that she had chosen someone else over me. There was no going back from this. I turned and walked out of the bedroom, leaving her on the floor, crying. As I made my way down the stairs, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight I had been carrying for so long was beginning to lift, replaced by a newfound clarity. Emily had been my world, and now that world was crumbling. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to build a new one, a world where I wasn't a victim of her whims, where I could take control of my life and my happiness. As I reached the front door, I stopped and looked back, half expecting her to come running after me. But she didn't. She stayed upstairs, wrapped in her guilt and shame. I opened the door and stepped out into the crisp morning air, feeling the cool breeze on my face. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. But I knew this was just the beginning. The fallout from this would be brutal, and I had no idea what the future held. All I knew was that I couldn't stay here, in this house, in this life that had become nothing more than a lie. I got into my car and drove, not sure where I was going, but knowing I couldn't stay. As I drove through the quiet streets, I felt the anger and pain slowly turning into something else, something I couldn't quite define. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the numbness that comes after a storm. Either way, I knew one thing for certain: my life would never be the same again. I drove for what felt like hours, my mind replaying the events of that morning over and over again. Every mile I put between myself and that house brought a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a strange sense of liberation. The betrayal was still fresh, the wound still raw, but I was beginning to see things with a new clarity. When I finally pulled over, I found myself in front of a small bar on the outskirts of town. It wasn't a place I had been before, but it seemed as good as any. I parked the car and walked inside, the smell of stale beer and old wood hitting me as I crossed the threshold. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of patrons nursing drinks at the bar and a bartender wiping down the counter. I took a seat at the far end of the bar, away from everyone else, and ordered a whiskey. The bartender didn't ask any questions, just poured the drink and slid it over to me. I downed it in one gulp, savoring the burn as it went down, then signaled for another. As I sat there, staring into the amber liquid, I tried to make sense of everything. Emily's words, her actions, they all swirled together in my mind, a chaotic mess that I couldn't untangle. The woman in my bed this morning was proof that my marriage was over, that whatever Emily and I had was gone, replaced by something toxic and cruel. But as much as I wanted to blame her, I couldn't ignore the part I had played in all of this. Somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of who we were, of what we meant to each other. I had let the distance between us grow, allowed the silence to fill the spaces where our love used to be. I wasn't the only one who had checked out. Emily had too, long before she ever said those awful words. The bartender set down another drink in front of me, and I nodded my thanks, taking a slower sip this time. The warmth of the alcohol spread through me, dulling the edges of my anger, making it easier to think. I knew I couldn't stay in that house with Emily anymore, not after what had happened. But what came next? I had no plan, no idea where I would go or what I would do. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the way things were. As I nursed my drink, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Emily's name flashing on the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Maybe it was morbid curiosity, or maybe it was just the need to hear what she had to say. "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. There was a long pause on the other end, and for a moment, I thought she might have hung up. But then I heard her breathing, shaky and uneven. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice small and fragile. "Does it matter?" I replied, taking another sip of my drink. "I'm not coming back." "Please," she whispered, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "I need to talk to you. I need to explain." "Explain what?" I snapped, my anger flaring up again. That you thought it was okay to bring another woman into our bed? That you've been sleeping around and didn't even have the decency to hide it? No, it's not like that, she said quickly, but I could hear the guilt in her voice. I made a mistake, okay? I didn't think it through. I was hurt and angry and I wanted to, I don't know, punish you, I guess, but I never meant for it to go this far. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You succeeded. Consider me punished. There was another long silence, and I could almost picture her sitting there, clutching the phone, trying to find the right words to say. But there were no right words, not anymore. Please, just come home, she begged. We can talk about this, figure things out. I don't want to lose you. You already have, I said coldly. Whatever we had, it is gone, Emily. You made sure of that. I heard her choke back a sob, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the look on her face that morning, the casual way she had tossed our marriage aside, and my sympathy evaporated. I'll come back to get my things, I said finally. But after that, we were done. I'm filing for divorce, and I suggest you get a lawyer. No, please, she cried, but I'd already made up my mind. I hung up the phone and downed the rest of my drink, the alcohol doing little to dull the pain. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. There would be lawyers, paperwork, endless discussions about who got what, but none of that mattered right now. What mattered was that I was taking the first step toward reclaiming my life, toward finding something better than the hollow shell of a marriage that Emily and I had been living in. I paid for my drinks and left the bar, the cool evening air a welcome relief from the stale warmth inside. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control, and that was a feeling I wasn't about to let go of. As I drove away, the lights of the bar fading into the distance, I felt a strange mix of emotions, grief for what I had lost, anger for what had been done to me, but also a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. The road before me was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, and I was ready to face whatever came next. I spent the night driving aimlessly, the hum of the engine and the darkened roads offering a kind of solace I hadn't known I needed. My mind kept circling back to the conversation with Emily, replaying her words and my own responses, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no making sense of it. Our marriage had been broken long before she decided to say those fateful words. Eventually, I found myself pulling into a motel parking lot on the outskirts of town. The neon sign flickered, casting an eerie glow over the cracked pavement. It wasn't the kind of place I would have ever chosen under normal circumstances, but nothing about my life was normal anymore. I needed a place to think, to plan my next move, and this would have to do. Inside the small, dimly lit room, I collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion washing over me. The events of the day had left me drained, both physically and emotionally, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emily S. face her look of shock, her tears, the way she had begged me to come back. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, to believe that she was genuinely remorseful, but another part of me, the part that had been betrayed, couldn't find it in me to forgive her. I reached for my phone, staring at the screen, debating whether to call someone, anyone, who could help me make sense of this mess. But who could I call? My closest friends had no idea what was happening, and I wasn't ready to explain everything. The thought of reliving the humiliation made me feel sick to my stomach. Instead, I opened up a browser and started searching for divorce lawyers in my area. The idea of legally severing my ties with Emily felt like the only way to regain control, to start fresh without the weight of our broken marriage hanging over me. As I scrolled through the results, I felt a flicker of hope, a small light in the overwhelming darkness. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward something better. I jotted down a few names, making a mental note to call them in the morning. But as I stared at the list, a wave of uncertainty washed over me. Could I really go through with this? Was I ready to end it all? To admit defeat and walk away from everything we had built together? The thought of starting over, of rebuilding my life from the ground up, was terrifying. But the alternative, staying with a woman who had betrayed me so deeply, was unbearable. The minutes ticked by, the silence of the motel room pressing in on me. I couldn't stay here forever, hiding away from the world. So I did the only thing that felt right. I reached out to the one person who might understand, who might be able to help me see things more clearly. My brother, Michael, picked up after the second ring. It was late, and I could hear the grogginess in his voice. "What is up, man? Everything okay?" "No, not really," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to talk to you. It's about Emily." There was a pause, and I could almost hear him waking up fully, his tone shifting to concern. "What's going on? Are you all right?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the words. She told me she's been seeing other men, just dropped it on me out of nowhere. And then this morning I found a woman in our bed. She brought her there, Mike. I don't even know who she is." The line went silent for a moment, and I could picture him sitting up in bed, processing what I had just said. Jesus, man, I'm so sorry. What the hell is she thinking? "I don't know," I admitted, my voice cracking. I feel like my whole world is falling apart. I don't know what to do." "Listen," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't have to figure this out alone. We'll get through this, okay? First things first, you need to get yourself somewhere safe, where you can think straight. Do you have a place to stay?" I looked around the shabby motel room, the peeling wallpaper and the flickering light above the bed. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I am at a motel, just needed to get out of the house." "Good," he said. "That is good. You need space to clear your head, but don't stay there too long, okay? You should be with family. Why don't you come stay with me for a while? We can figure things out from here." The offer was tempting. Michael lived a few hours away, far enough to give me the distance I needed from Emily, but close enough that I wouldn't feel completely isolated. And right now, the thought of being around someone who cared about me, who wouldn't judge me, was exactly what I needed. "Yeah," I finally agreed. "I think I'll do that." "Thanks, Mike. I don't know what I'd do without you." "Hey, that's what brothers are for," he replied, his voice warm. "Get some rest tonight, and then head over here tomorrow. We'll sort this out together." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, feeling a small sense of relief. I wasn't alone in this. I had someone in my corner, someone who would help me get through this nightmare. As I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, I tried to push all thoughts of Emily out of my mind. But it was impossible. Her betrayal had cut too deep, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the pain. All I could do was try to survive it, to keep moving forward, one painful step at a time. The next morning, I packed up my things and checked out of the motel. The drive to Michael S. place was long and quiet, the roads winding through endless stretches of countryside. I used the time to think, to try and make sense of my jumbled emotions. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the image of Emily S.'s face, the tears in her eyes as she begged me to come back. When I finally arrived at Michael S.'s house, he was waiting for me on the porch, his expression a mix of concern and determination. He pulled me into a tight hug, and for the first time in days I felt a flicker of comfort, of safety. "You're gonna be okay," he said, his voice reassuring. "We'll get through this, I promise." As I stepped inside, the weight of everything that had happened started to lift, just a little. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I wouldn't have to face it alone, and for now, that was enough. Michael S. house was a haven of normalcy in the midst of my chaos. It was a modest place, nothing fancy, but it felt like home in a way that mine hadn't in a long time. The smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted me as I walked in, and the warmth of the kitchen light made me feel like I could finally breathe again. "Take your time," Michael said as he led me to the guest room. "You can stay as long as you need. No pressure, no questions, just whatever you need to do to get through this." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. The guest room was small but cozy, with a neatly made bed and a dresser that looked like it hadn't been used in a while. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the past few days catching up to me all at once. Michael stood in the doorway watching me with concern. "You hungry?" I was about to make some breakfast. I shook my head. "No, I'm good. Just tired." "Yeah, I bet." He hesitated, then stepped into the room, sitting down next to me. Listen, I know you said you didn't want to talk about it, but if you ever do, I am here. I'm not going to pretend to know what you're going through, but I'll help in any way I can. I looked at him, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Michael had always been the strong one, the one who had his life together. Seeing him like this, so genuinely worried about me, made it all feel real in a way that nothing else had. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Everything is so messed up, and I don't know how to fix it, or if I even can. You don't have to fix it, he said softly. Not right now, anyway. Just focus on taking care of yourself. The rest will come later. I nodded, trying to absorb his words, but the weight of everything was still pressing down on me. I keep thinking about what she said, you know? How I've become so weak in bed. It's like I can get it out of my head. Like it's all my fault somehow. Michael S.'s expression hardened and he shook his head. No, Dawn, to do that to yourself. Whatever problems you two had, that's no excuse for what she did. She made a choice, and that S on her, not you. I wanted to believe him, but the doubts were still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I had spent so many years trying to be the best husband I could be, sacrificing my own needs and desires to make sure Emily was happy. And now, all I could think about was how I had failed to keep her satisfied, failed to keep her from looking elsewhere. It just feels like everything I thought I knew about our marriage was a lie, I said, my voice trembling, like I was living in some fantasy, and she was just going through the motions. Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, I don't know what was going on in her head, but I do know that you've always been a good guy, and you didn't deserve this. No one does. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of his words hanging between us. I could feel the tears building behind my eyes, but I forced them back, refusing to let myself break down. I had cried enough already now. I needed to figure out what came next. I am going to call a lawyer, I finally said, breaking the silence. I don't see any other way out of this. I can stay with her after what she did. Michael nodded, his expression somber. That's probably for the best. It's not going to be easy, but you'll get through it, and I'll be here to help whatever you need. Thanks, I said, my voice barely audible. I appreciate it. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. You are my brother. We've got each other's backs no matter what. The weight of his words settled over me, a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone in this. As much as I hated the idea of going through a divorce, of tearing apart the life Emily and I had built together, I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of her betrayal, couldn't keep questioning my own worth because of her choices. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of breakfast wafting through the house: eggs, bacon, and toast, the kind of meal that used to start my weekends off right. I took a deep breath, letting the familiar scent ground me as I got out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. Michael was already at the stove, flipping bacon in a pan. He looked up when he saw me, offering a small smile. Morning. Figured you could use a good meal. Thanks, I said, sliding into a chair at the kitchen table. I appreciate it. He set a plate of food in front of me and sat down across from me with his own. We ate in silence for a while, the sound of the TV playing in the background, filling the room. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled with words. As I finished my breakfast, I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe I could find a way to rebuild my life, to move forward without the weight of the past dragging me down. After breakfast, I took a shower, letting the hot water wash away the remnants of the night before. As the steam filled the bathroom, I felt a small sense of clarity begin to emerge. I knew what I had to do, even if it scared me. I had to move on, to let go of the life I had once imagined for myself and start building a new one. When I got out of the shower, I dressed quickly and grabbed my phone. It was time to start making calls, to start the process of ending my marriage and moving on with my life. I dialed the first number I had written down, my heart pounding as I waited for someone to pick up. Law offices of Richards and Stevens, how may I help you? A cheerful voice on the other end of the line answered. Hi, my name is Dan, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I need to speak to someone about a divorce. Of course, the receptionist said, her tone professional and understanding. I can set up a consultation for you with one of our attorneys. When would be a good time? I scheduled the appointment, feeling a sense of determination settle over me. This was the first real step toward reclaiming my life. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was already gone. When I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had a plan now, a way forward. It wasn't going to fix everything overnight, but it was a start. And that was all I needed for now, a way to start putting the pieces of my life back together, one small step at a time. Michael knocked on the doorframe, peeking into the room. Everything all right? I nodded, feeling a small smile tug at the corners of my mouth. Yeah, I think it will be. Good, he said, smiling back. One step at a time, right? Right, I agreed, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in what felt like forever. One step at a time. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, meetings with the lawyer, and long conversations with Michael. My life had become a series of tasks, each one pushing me closer to the inevitable end of my marriage. It was strange how quickly everything had changed just a week ago. I had been living in denial, clinging to the idea that Emily and I could still make things work. Now, I was focused on untangling myself from the life we had built together, determined to find a way forward on my own. The lawyer, a sharp and efficient woman named Karen, had been a godsend. During our initial consultation, she laid out the process in clear, straightforward terms, walking me through the steps of filing for divorce, dividing assets, and most importantly, protecting myself from any potential fallout. Her calm, confident demeanor was exactly what I needed, and I left her office feeling more in control than I had in days. We'll file the petition as soon as possible, Karen had told me, her tone professional but not unkind. Given the circumstances, I recommend we push for a quick resolution. It's clear that this marriage isn't salvageable, and the sooner we get everything finalized, the sooner you can move on with your life. I had agreed without hesitation. There was no point in dragging this out. Emily had made her choice, and I needed to make mine. The sooner we were done, the sooner I could start putting the pieces of my life back together. The following week, I began the difficult task of packing up my things. Michael had offered to come with me, but I declined, wanting to face this alone. I needed to walk through that house, to confront the memories, and decide what was worth keeping and what I needed to leave behind. When I arrived at the house, the first thing that struck me was how empty it felt. Emily's car was in the driveway, but the house itself seemed lifeless, as if all the warmth and love it once held had been sucked out, leaving nothing but a shell. I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open, bracing myself for whatever I might find inside. Emily was sitting in the living room, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red from crying. For a moment, neither of us said anything, the silence between us thick with all the things we hadn't said, all the apologies that would never be enough. I didn't think you'd come back, she finally said, her voice hoarse. I'm just here to get my things, I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. I didn't want to engage in another argument, didn't want to hear more excuses or pleas for forgiveness. I just wanted to get out of there with whatever was left of my dignity intact. She nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she stood up. I understand, I'll stay out of your way. I didn't respond, instead heading upstairs to the bedroom. As I opened the closet, the familiar scent of Emily's perfume hit me, bringing back a flood of memories, mornings spent lying in bed together, late-night conversations, the easy comfort of being in love. But those memories were tainted now, twisted by the knowledge of her betrayal. I grabbed a suitcase from the top shelf and began packing my clothes, moving quickly to avoid getting caught up in sentimentality. I didn't want to think about the life we had shared, didn't want to remember the good times. I just wanted to get out. As I packed, I heard Emily moving around downstairs, the soft clatter of dishes and the creak of floorboards. The sounds were a painful reminder of how normal our life had once been, how we had fallen into routines and habits that had seemed so secure, so permanent. Now those routines felt like lies, comforting illusions that had masked the reality of our crumbling marriage. When I finished packing, I took a moment to look around the bedroom, trying to decide if there was anything else worth taking. My eyes fell on a photo of the two of us, taken on our honeymoon. We were standing on the beach, arms around each other, smiling like we didn't have a care in the world. I stared at it for a long time, wondering how we had gone from that moment to this one. Finally, I turned away, leaving the photo where it was. It didn't belong to me anymore. It was part of a past that I was no longer a part of, a reminder of a life that had ended the moment Emily made her choice. I carried the suitcase downstairs, where I found Emily standing by the front door. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. "I'll have the lawyer contact you," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "We can handle everything through them from now on." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. I am sorry, Dan, for everything." I looked at her, trying to feel something: anger, sadness, even pity, but all I felt was a strange emptiness, a numbness that had settled over me like a blanket. "Take care of yourself, Emily," I said quietly, and with that, I walked out the door, leaving her standing there, alone in the house that had once been our home. The drive back to Michael S. was quiet, the roads empty and the sky overcast. I kept replaying the last few moments with Emily in my mind, trying to understand how we had ended up here. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't find any answers, only more questions. When I pulled into Michael S.'s driveway, he was waiting for me on the porch, just like he had been when I first arrived. He gave me a small nod as I stepped out of the car, a silent acknowledgement of what I had just done. "How did it go?" he asked as I walked up to the porch. "It's done," I replied, my voice flat. "I got my stuff, told her the lawyers would handle the rest." He nodded again, his expression sympathetic. "That's good. It has a big step." "Yeah," I said, not really feeling the weight of those words. It didn't feel like a big step, not yet. It just felt like one more thing I had to do, one more piece of my life that I had to dismantle. We went inside, and Michael led me to the living room, where he had set out a couple of beers on the coffee table. I sank into the couch, feeling the exhaustion of the past week finally catch up to me. Michael handed me a beer, and we sat in silence for a while, the TV playing in the background, neither of us really paying attention to it. "You did the right thing," Michael said after a long pause, his voice gentle. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you did." "I know," I said, though the words felt hollow. It feels like I am losing everything." "You are not," he assured me. "You are losing something that was already gone. Now you've got the chance to build something new, something better." I nodded, taking a sip of my beer. He was right, of course, but that didn't make it any easier. The life I had known, the future I had imagined with Emily, it was all gone, and I was left standing in the wreckage trying to figure out where to go from here. As we sat there, the reality of my situation began to sink in. This was my life now, a life without Emily, without the marriage I had once believed in so deeply. It was a terrifying thought, but also a liberating one. I was free now, free to create a new path for myself, free to find happiness on my own terms. But as much as I wanted to embrace that freedom, I knew it would be a long, difficult journey. The pain of Emily's betrayal was still fresh, the wounds still raw, and it would take time to heal, time to find myself again. For now, all I could do was take it one day at a time, one small step at a time, and hope that eventually I would come out on the other side stronger, wiser, and ready to live the life I deserved. And maybe, just maybe, that life would be better than the one I had lost. The first few days after moving in with Michael felt like stepping into a strange new world. The rhythms of my old life, the routines with Emily, the familiarity of our home, the habits we had built together were gone, replaced by the quiet solitude of my brother S. house. It was disorienting at first, like I was living someone else's life. But as the days passed, I began to settle into this new reality, finding small comforts in the routine I was beginning to create for myself. Mornings started with coffee on the porch, the early light filtering through the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. Michael would usually join me, his presence a steadying force in the chaos that had become my life. We didn't talk much about Emily or the divorce instead. We focused on the simple things: work, sports, whatever was on TV. It was a relief, in a way, to step out of my own head, even if just for a little while. I threw myself into the process of the divorce, determined to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it was. Karen, my lawyer, had been a pillar of strength throughout the entire ordeal. She was relentless in her pursuit of a fair settlement, ensuring that I wouldn't walk away empty-handed. I was grateful for her no-nonsense attitude, even if it meant facing the harsh realities of what my life had become. One day, about a week after I had moved in with Michael, I received a call from Emily. I stared at her name on the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Part of me didn't want to hear her voice, didn't want to be dragged back into the emotional turmoil that had consumed me for so long. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times, the love we had shared, compelled me to answer. "Hello," I said, my voice as neutral as I could make it. "Dan," she said softly, and just hearing her say my name sent a pang of something regret, maybe through my chest. "I know you don't want to talk to me, but I needed to hear your voice. I've been thinking a lot about everything about us." I didn't respond right away, letting her words hang in the air. I could tell she was waiting for me to say something, to acknowledge what she had said, but I wasn't sure I had anything left to say. "Dan, I'm so sorry for everything," she continued when I didn't respond. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I never meant for things to end up like this. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you until it was too late." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. I had heard these words before, the apologies and the regret, but they felt hollow now, too little too late. "What do you want, Emily?" I finally asked, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. She hesitated, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. "I just wanted to see if there's any chance at all that we could fix this. I miss you, Dan. I miss us." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I was back in that house, back in the life we had shared. But then, the memories of her betrayal came flooding back, the lies, the other woman in our bed, the cold way she had thrown our marriage away. "There's nothing left to fix," I said quietly, the finality of the words settling over me like a heavy weight. "You made your choice, Emily, and now I am making mine." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her heart breaking. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I knew it was the right decision. We couldn't go back, no matter how much we both might want to. The trust, the love, everything that had made our marriage what it was gone. "I understand," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Dan, I really am." "Take care of yourself, Emily," I said, echoing the words I had spoken the last time I saw her. Then I hung up, letting the silence of Michael S. house fill the space where her voice had been. The call left me feeling drained but also strangely resolved. It was as if a door had closed, locking away that part of my life for good. Emily S. apology, her regret it was too late to change anything, too late to save what we had lost. And now, it was time for me to move on. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work. My job had always been a source of pride for me, a place where I felt competent and in control, and I needed that now more than ever. The routine of going to the office, dealing with clients, and meeting deadlines gave me a sense of normalcy, a way to focus on something other than the wreckage of my personal life. But even as I immersed myself in work, I couldn't escape the memories of my marriage, the constant replay of where things had gone wrong. Every now and then, something would trigger a memory, a song on the radio, a passing comment from a coworker, and I'd be right back in that place, reliving the pain all over again. Michael noticed, of course. He wasn't the type to pry, but he would check in on me, making sure I was eating, getting out of the house, trying to live some semblance of a normal life. One night, after we had finished dinner, he suggested we go out for drinks. "You've been cooped up in here too long," he said, clapping me on the back. "Let's go out, have a few beers, and blow off some steam." I hesitated, the idea of socializing feeling like more effort than it was worth, but I could see that he was trying to help, trying to pull me out of the funk I had fallen into. And maybe he was right. Maybe I did need to get out, to remind myself that there was a world beyond the pain I was feeling. Yeah, okay, I agreed, forcing a smile. Let's go, eh? We ended up at a local bar not far from Michael S. Place, a cozy little spot with dim lighting and a jukebox playing classic rock. It wasn't crowded, just a few regulars scattered around the room, and I was grateful for the low-key atmosphere. We found a table near the back and ordered a couple of beers, the conversation easy and light. For the first time in weeks, I felt myself relaxing, the tension in my shoulders easing as we talked about anything but the divorce. We laughed about old times, shared stories about work, and for a little while I was able to forget about everything that had happened, to just be in the moment. After a few drinks, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I noticed a woman sitting alone at the bar, her head bent over a glass of wine. There was something about her, maybe the way she was staring into her drink with a look of quiet resignation that caught my attention. She looked as lost as I felt, and before I knew it, I found myself walking over to her. "Is this seat taken?" I asked, gesturing to the stool next to her. She looked up, startled, and for a moment I thought she was going to brush me off. But then she gave me a small, tired smile and shook her head. "No, go ahead." I sat down, feeling a strange mix of nerves and curiosity. There was something about this woman, something in her eyes that told me she had a story of her own, a burden she was carrying. "I am Dan," I said, offering my hand. "Rachel," she replied, shaking it gently. Her hand was warm, and there was a softness to her touch that put me at ease. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us nursing our drinks, the noise of the bar fading into the background. I didn't know what to say, didn't even know why I had approached her in the first place. But there was something comforting about being near someone who seemed as broken as I felt. "Rough night?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. She let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You could say that." "Yeah," I said, nodding. "I know the feeling." She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if she could see the hurt I was trying to hide. "What's your story, Dan?" I hesitated, not sure how much I wanted to share with a stranger, but something about her made me feel like I could be honest, like I didn't have to pretend. "I'm going through a divorce," I admitted. "My wife, she cheated on me." Rachel's expression softened and she reached out to touch my arm. "I'm sorry. That is tough." "Yeah," I said, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "It's been rough." She nodded, her hand still resting on my arm. "I get it. I'm going through something similar." The words hung between us, a shared understanding of the pain we were both carrying. It was strange, sitting there with this woman I had just met. But in that moment, I felt a connection, a sense of solidarity in our shared experience. "Do you want to talk about it?" I asked, not sure what else to say. She shrugged, taking a sip of her wine. "Maybe later."